go around and just quickly introduce ourselves. So if you could share your names, pronouns if you're comfortable, and what ward you live in, that would be great. And so once we're going to do popcorn. So once you say it, like introduce yourself, send it over to someone else. So I will start. Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah King. I am in Ward 8, and I am on the Wards 1 and 8 steering committee. And I am going to send it over to Jonathan.
I am Jonathan Chappell-Sokol. I live on North Prospect Street in Ward 1. I'm on the Wards 1-8 steering committee, and I'll pass it to Cheryl Green.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Green, and I live in Ward 1. I live in Burlington co-housing, and glad to be here tonight.
And why don't we go over to Carol?
Hi, this is Carol Livingston. I'm in Ward 1, and I also am on the Ward 1 and 8 steering committee. I'll pass it on to Jeffrey.
Hello, Jeffrey DeSena, probably the newest one here, just moved in a few weeks ago, and my fiance Ashley will be listening in as well. Pass it on to, who else can I see? Wendy.
Hi, I'm Wendy Koenig. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the University of Vermont. I'll pass it to my colleague, Joe Spidell.
Hi, good evening. Joe Spidell, he, his pronouns. I work with Wendy in community relations. I live in Ward 3, and I will pass it on to Cyril, who I keep running into in the last month. I think I've seen him 3 or 4 times.
Hi. Cyril Flash, Ward 1. I'm also at Burlington Co-housing. And let's see, who can I pass it to? Have we done Lisa yet? Okay, how about Lisa Kingsbury?
Thanks, Cyril. My name is Lisa Kingsbury. I use she, her pronouns. I'm here on behalf of the university. I work in planning, design, and construction. I'm the Associate Director of Planning. Thanks for having us tonight. And I will pass it to Jean Hopkins.
Hi, yes, I'm here at co-housing in Ward 1 also. And let's see, we're busy with League of Women Voters, of course. So we have, concerns about, gun safety too in this town. So might speak on that later. Okay, I'll pass this on to, let's see, is Tom Derenthal spoken?
I'm here. My name's Tom
Okay.
Derenthal. I live on Nash Place, that's Ward 1, and I'm also on the Ward 1-8 steering committee. And I'll pass it off to Megan.
Here, I'm Megan Tuttle. I'm the planning director for the city, and I live in Ward 7. Sorry, I forgot the instructions. I will pass it to Karen Long. Have you introduced yourself?
No, I haven't. Thanks, Megan. Good to see you. I'm Karen Long, and I live on Henry Street. My husband, Michael, will also be joining the meeting. And we've been here, I don't know, 38 years, I think, something like that. Very long. Thank you. At this point, I feel, well, I guess I can look at all the names. I don't really know. Allie House.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, my name's Allie. I use she, her pronouns. I am a social worker in the community with Blend. I'm in Ward 8 and I'm running for city council. Popcorn. Glenn.
People have to be awake.
All right, muted.
Yeah.
Hi, Glenn McCrae.
And Holly Shaner McCrae.
On Mansfield Avenue, Ward 1. And pass it on to my colleague Brian Pine on the Burlington Aging Council, among other things.
Thanks, Glenn. I'm Brian Pine. I am Director of the city's Community and Economic Development Office. And I'm way back, I was a Ward 1 resident, but I've been a Ward 3 resident for the last 30 plus years. And I'm not sure, but I'll pick an old friend, Julie Springer.
Thanks, Brian. It's Julie Springer, Ward 1, she, her pronouns. And I will pass it on to Joe. Have you been called yet? You have. Keith?
Oh, hi. Thank you, Julie. I'm Keith Pillsbury. I live on University Terrace in Ward 8. And I'm currently a member of the Ward 8 and 1 steering committee. I'll pass it on to Rob Gutman.
Thanks, Keith. I'm Rob Gutman, and I live on North William Street in Ward 1, and I too am running for City Council, and I'm thrilled to be here with you all tonight. And I'm looking hard and deep, and I think all the corn's been popped.
I think we have to go to Kaya and then Angie.
Okay.
Hi everyone, my name's Kaya. I use she, her pronouns. I'm working with Gail in the Office of Student and Community Relations this semester, so she just invited me to join the meeting. So thank you.
And we can go to Angie.
Hi, I'm Angie Chapel-Sokol. I live in Ward 1.
Great, thank you. And then Maddie.
Hi, I'm Maddie. I'm a resident of Ward 8. I live on Hungerford Terrace. I've lived there for 40 years.
Thank you, Maddie. And then Fletcher, I don't think you've gone.
Nope, I'm Fletcher and I live in Ward 1.
Great, thank you. And then there's folks that are attendees. So I'm just going to go through and ask you to unmute. And if you feel comfortable introducing yourself, great. If not, you can just ignore my request. Linda, going to you first.
Hi, it's Linda Risby, live on Hungerford Terrace. He, pronouns she, her. And so thanks for having Miss NPA tonight.
Thank you. And then we're going to go to Susan.
Hi, it's Bob Vitani. I'm Susan Vitani's husband, and we live on Fletcher Place in Ward 1. Nice to meet everybody.
Thank you. And then we're going to go to Caitlin.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Halpert. I live on the corner of Loomis and Mansfield.
Thank you. And then to Nina.
Hi, my name is Nina Mazuzin.
Oh, I think you're muted. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Nina, and my husband and I live on East Avenue. He's lived here for now 60 years. I've lived here only 30 some of those, but we're very interested in being active in the community and helping in any way we can.
Great, thank you. And then Maria.
Hi, I'm Maria Shanklapur, and I'm still muted.
Nope, you're good.
Okay, all right. I live on North William Street, Ward 1, and I am happy to be here.
Thank you. And then I believe our last neighbor is Cindy.
Hi, I'm Cindy Cook. I live on East Avenue and I'm looking forward to this meeting. I was active in the NPA for a while and quite a while actually, and took a break, and I'm looking forward to getting back involved more, and look forward to a very full meeting tonight.
Great, thank you. I think that's everyone. I don't know if I missed anyone, but thank you all for being here. It should be an exciting meeting. Now we're going to go into speak out. If you would like to participate in speak out, please indicate by either using the raise hand function or physically just raise your hand to give me a heads up. Does anyone want to participate in speak out? Karen, I see your hands up first, so you can start.
Thank you. This is an announcement also, but on Friday, on February 11th, 5:30 on Channel 17, there will be a 1-hour discussion, a program with CEDO and DPW and a couple of residents that are going to discuss the Great Street, Main Street proposal using TIF funds. And I did want to share that I did go to the February 1st meeting about this, and there were around 20 participants, which is very few compared to the 45,000 residents we have. I believe it's a concept and not a plan. They can't really give the studying on this it happened in 2016 when we talked about great streets, and I did go to those meetings. I'm not comfortable with signing over 25.9 million in TIF funds for this plan until it's more baked. There were people there that discussed St. Paul Street. So, we used 5 million in TIF funds to redo those streets. And these were some of the comments of the residents there. They felt it was not safe for bicycling anymore, that the plows can't clear away the snow. There are kind of like bump out rain gardens, so it makes it really difficult for that. In the summer, the rain gardens are not maintained well. One gentleman said that he felt it was a really waste of money because he doesn't see that it's vibrant and there's very little pedestrian traffic. So I really, I caution people about, investing 30 million on Main Street. I am not in favor of TIF because it does divert revenue from the schools. 75% of the school tax money is diverted and 100% of the municipal tax. It is very complicated. Our counselors say that to me. Laura Wheelock from DPW. I mean, it's a hard thing to understand. And my husband and I have been digging very deep into it. And I really think you should think hard. Look up TIF. Just look it up, Google it. And you'll see TIF was developed for blighted areas. It's used to stimulate development that won't otherwise happen. I do not feel Main Street is blighted, nor is our downtown. And don't forget what happened with the pit. Development doesn't always go as planned. Thank you.
Okay, and then we'll go to Tom.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask people that we have an upcoming agenda item for the candidates for city council and school board. And if you have questions, please ask them when we get to that part of the agenda. I was hoping that there'd be a chat function where it could capture questions for people that would otherwise not like to voice them, but we don't have that. So the only way that your question will be asked is if you speak up. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Last call for speak out. Does anyone else? Susan, I see your hand is raised. You should be able to unmute.
Sorry, it's Bobby Tani. I'm using Susan's computer. Just want to bring up the ongoing project proposal behind our houses on Fletcher Place. It's a very dangerous design. It is to be built atop a gully head failure, which is a prelude to a landslide. I asked Councilperson Zoraya Hightower.
Recording in progress.
Project. She didn't seem to know what it was. I'm interested to hear what Rob Gutman might have to say about it when we speak later. Thanks very much.
Okay, and then Carol, your hand is raised.
Hi, just a quick shout out to the Old East End who ran an amazing winterlude this weekend. Hope some of you had a chance to be part of that. Really, really wonderful community event down here on Szymanska Park with skiing and snowshoeing and hot chocolate and a fire, and it's just really, really wonderful. There'll be more events coming up, so keep an eye out for those flyers that might appear in your mailboxes or on Front Porch Forum. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else? Final call. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I am going to pass it over to Keith to take us to the housing panel.
Good evening. The housing panel was designed by the NPA steering committee when in December, two of our three counselors told us that the most frequent questions they had or concerns they heard were on housing. So we decided to have a panel discussion between city leaders and the UVM people involved with planning. And so we've invited them tonight. The questions that we are going to ask were all put together by the steering committee. And I will go through those questions, and then hopefully we'll save time for you to react to give after you've gotten the information. The thing that came up that's just recently come up is that the UVM is going to the planning committee for a project on Trinity College campus. We will ask them towards the end of the questions if they would be willing to, I believe they have some information, some pictures or slides they want to talk to us so that we can have them present that. We will try to stay within the 50 minutes and give you at least 10 to 15 minutes response to their questions. So they've introduced themselves, but basically who's on our panel are Wendy Koenig from UVM, Joe Spidell from UVM, Lisa Kingsbury from UVM. From the city is Brian Pine and Megan Tuttle. I'm going to go through with a sort of the context of why we are doing this. Our Ward 1 and Ward 8 Neighborhood Planning Assembly is a grassroots neighborhood organization that encourage and engage resident participation to make our neighborhood and our city a great place to live. Our NPA are committed to inclusive, equitable, livable, and multi-generational sustainability. In recent years, we've become increasingly concerned about the quantity, quality, and cost of housing in the East District. We believe our neighborhoods in the East District are unaffordable for most working families and completely out of the question for new Americans. This is unfortunate as our area provides robust transportation, food, and other shopping opportunities, community health centers, and the UVM Medical Center, plus many opportunities for employment. I'll begin with the first question, and I'm going to ask our panelists who maybe we can start with UVM first and then go to city or back and forth, depending on the question and depending on who has to give information. The first question on the list that I sent out, we're going to use that as a prelude to the, I think the presentation video or show that you have regarding last night's planning session. The first question is, how does the city and UVM expect the community or the neighbors around the university to continue to absorb or accommodate all those students who are not able to live on campus? How do UVM leaders plan to engage long-term residents in the district to gather their perspectives?
So Keith, I think I'll start. I think it might be easier if we did our slide presentation first, because it might inform some context to these questions. Would you be willing to do that, or do you want us to do the questions first?
We thought that we wanted to make sure the focus of these questions is more on vision, not just what's happening right now. So, okay.
You know, I'll make an attempt to answer that first question. I'll invite Joe and Lisa to fill in if they would like to. I think that the university, what we've been talking about with the city council and what we've been talking about with the planning commission is a plan to build more student housing in an effort to relieve some of the housing concerns and issues facing the city of Burlington. We know that we're a large institution. We know that we play a big part in the population of Burlington. I think most people know that UVM it requires first and second year students to live on campus. That is unusual. We have a slide later that will point to some information about that. But if you look at our peer institutions across the region in New England and across the country, most schools were, at least most state public institutions, require first years to live on campus. Some schools require no students to live on campus. So UVM has made the decision to have first and second year students live on campus. We also do a lot of surveying of our students to find out what their thoughts are and needs are in terms of housing. One of the things that we've really heard from students in our most recent attempts to reach out and survey and poll them is that many of our graduate students would like to live on campus. That's not currently something we provide. So the housing project that we're talking about at Trinity campus and looking towards future housing projects on campus will be inclusive of not only undergraduate students, but also graduate students. And graduate students have also expressed an interest in living on campus because many of them don't want to have cars. They want to be able to be in walkable situations to attend their courses and do their clinical rotations or internships. And so that is a current part of what we're planning. I'd also like to say that I think that in the way that you asked that question about how long will we continue to put students in communities and neighborhoods, I think that I'd like to reframe that a little bit and say that our students think of themselves as a part of this community, and we think of them that way as well. And I know that that can seem like a transient thing when they're here for a 4-year period of time. I will tell you that we've put a lot of effort into tracking how long students stay, how many students stay after they graduate. About 70% of our Vermont student population stays in Vermont post-graduation, and about 34% of our out-of-state students stay. I think it's kind of a wonderful thing that students come to attend UVM and want to stay and make their lives in Vermont. I think it's particularly helpful when we see that we have a demographic challenge with younger people wanting to come and live and work in Vermont. So if we can create new Vermonters who are going to be productive citizens and want to stay here, we're going to want to continue to do that. And with some of the new housing projects we're talking about, we're hoping that we can produce some pretty significant additive housing to campus. Joe and Lisa, I'll let you chime in if you have anything else.
I think you've stated that all really well, Wendy.
Brian or Megan, do you want to add anything?
I'll just add to what Wendy said from the perspective of at least the work that I'm engaged in from the city with planning and zoning issues in particular. This question that you asked about, absorbing and accommodating students that can't live on campus and what we do about that in the future. I think it also relates back to the kind of framing question or the framing issue that you shared, Keith, at the beginning of this panel, just about, who can live in all of our neighborhoods in the city. And I think that this is a big part of the reason why the issues of looking at housing for students on campus or near campus is always paired with other housing work that we have been doing in the last number of years. We know that we need to make changes to how and where we can accommodate new homes in Burlington for any number of people. And so we are trying to make sure that thinking about the issues of, where housing is located for students is one of the things that we're considering right alongside all of the other housing work that we're doing.
Brian?
I want to add, if I could, just one more thing. I'm sorry. Just, you know, I've been in my role at UVM for almost 17 years now. And so, you know, over the years, this comes up at this NPA, at other NPAs, and it seems like a lot of times, you know, the conversation is often about balance, right? So I don't hear a lot of people say, well, sometimes people say it, but I don't hear most people say UVM really needs to house all of their students. I hear a lot of people say that the students are welcome in the neighborhood, and, you know, people use their students as babysitters, they help the neighbors out. But when the balance tips, then it gets to be too much. And for a long time, for most of my years at UVM, it seems like the conversation about that balance was really about quality of life and noise and things like that. And I think that the city and UVM have partnered to do a lot of work around quality of life, and Joe or Gail could talk a little bit more about the work that they've been doing in the neighborhoods. You know, now I think the conversation has really become more about, you know, what do we have, how much housing do we have, and who can live here, and are we providing enough so that we are allowing more balance in the neighborhoods and being able to bring students on campus in order to help the housing crunch that is in Burlington and Chittenden County and all of Vermont and really all across the country. And I think that's what we would really like to do with this project that we're talking about at Trinity, is bring some more students onto campus so that we can create a little more of that balance.
Okay, if it's okay, I'll go on to the next question. What is the city and UVM's intention to encourage more mixed age neighborhoods near the university? Could the city talk about that first? Or?
Sure. I will address that point, Keith, and I think it's an important one to go back to the point Lisa made actually about sort of balance and mixed ages and, you know, mixed household types. And I think all of those are goals that we can broadly agree that those are good. Those are positive goals. The city, with the support of the NPAs and the community engaged in the neighborhood project several years ago, and really laid out a framework, sort of a strategy and a framework for a focus around really trying to ensure that we can sort of peacefully coexist as longtime residents as well as newcomers who may come to attend the university. Perhaps they stay for only 4 years, or perhaps they stay for 40 years. But nonetheless, just try to ensure that we acknowledge that we have impacts no matter how long we're staying here. And that I think it's, you know, we had enhanced the quality of life was one of the sort of frameworks. We had 3 basic areas: enhanced quality of life initiatives, contain and slow down the conversion of single family homes from single family occupants to you know, multifamily, primarily student occupied homes was the focus there, as well as the sort of reverse of that, which is trying to find the resources and the capacity to convert selected student properties or properties that are predominantly occupied by students into non-student housing. And so those are sort of the broad categories of the framework. I would have to say that we were moving toward making some progress before the pandemic, and really honestly, our office has, and the city council and the mayor's office has largely been focused for the last 22 months on the pandemic, and hasn't been able to focus on these issues quite as much. So I think the fact that we're here tonight to talk about one of the most significant developments, which is the rezoning of Trinity to ensure that Trinity can become the location of a significant increase in supply for on-campus housing, is really, a very positive development. And I think it really is very consistent with the efforts that the city, with support from the neighborhood, and I think with UVM joining us at the table, have been focused on, is how, because our futures are linked. I mean, our destinies are tied together, and we're really, I think, all in this together. Hopefully we will make substantial progress with Trinity Campus, and I think that's a really exciting development to be talking about at this point.
The one thing that I would add to what Brian said, in addition to the specific goals that we had in the neighborhood project and the work that we have been, working with all of you to advance, specific to, the relationship between the university and the neighborhoods. Kind of speaking to your point, Keith, again, about mixed age neighborhoods and neighborhoods that are available and have options for many different people to live in. There have been a number of other housing initiatives that we've been working on in the last few years that are really aimed at that, having neighborhoods where people of many ages can live, where neighbors can age in their own neighborhood. So one thing that the City Council worked on in 2019 and 2020 was updating our zoning to make ADUs more permissible, accessory dwelling units, so that people have that as a housing option, that they could, if they're able to, create a small apartment in their backyard that might allow them to have flexibility to have a family member or a caregiver, or even, to earn some income to help them stay in their home over time. That's another piece of work that kind of complements all of the things that we've been doing, that look specifically at the issues of housing and housing on the institution's campuses.
Does the university representatives want to add anything to what's been said? Okay, I can go on to the next question. What does UVM think is its responsibility is to engage with Burlington and the county to solve the housing crisis as one of the area's largest employers and recruiters of people to live in Burlington area for 4 years?
So Keith, I'll open it up and let Joe and Lisa add anything if they'd like. But, as we said before, I think that UVM is acutely aware that we are a big part of this community. We're very proud to be able to be a part of Burlington and a part of Chittenden County. We think it is our responsibility, as Lisa so eloquently put it, to help maintain a balance. And we would really like to help to restore some of that balance by a project like Trinity and future projects as we move forward with achieving some zoning changes that will help us to achieve building the most efficient housing possible and providing additive beds for our students to help ease a little bit of the burden of the housing shortage in Burlington and the county and the state. So I think we're aware that we definitely have a role in helping to solve this problem, and we would really like to do that by being able to build more housing for our students and add additional kinds of students, as I mentioned before, with trying to house some graduate students on campus as well as undergrads. Joe or Lisa, do you have anything else?
Okay, thank you. I go on to the next question. Does UVM and the city think it has some responsibility to work on more density of living units to provide for essentially people who, for students, for example, or for those people who want to take advantage of living and working in Burlington, to take the pressure off the development of housing outside of the city and the county that's really using up valuable cropland?
I'll start quickly. Sorry, Megan. Just by saying that, yeah, we definitely are interested in, and you'll see when we get to the slides for the Trinity project, the reason why we're asking for some zoning changes there is to make sure that we're being efficient and achieving density on a piece of property that we can build on. So I think that's the goal.
Yeah, I think from the city's perspective, that's one of our goals as well, is, you know, our city plan, Plan BTV, talks about the importance of identifying ways that we can help support more housing being created on the institution's campuses. The neighborhood project talks about the same thing. The neighborhood project also talks about, you know, looking for other areas of our city where we might be able to encourage more dense housing to be created, in order to help us, you know, both increase the number of homes that are available for students and for non-students, but also to kind of help us, you know, create and some of the other goals that Brian mentioned about the neighborhood project to help us kind of slow the conversion of single family homes in particular in some of these neighborhoods. So we definitely agree that it is a really important objective for us to be working together on. And I'll say that last night, the university presented their ideas for Trinity campus to our planning commission, and the planning commission was also, you know, really ready to have a conversation about ways that we could look at the zoning for the Trinity campus to help them achieve the goal of housing more students on that campus. So I think, yes, we definitely see a role of zoning here to help with this issue.
If everyone's finished, I'll go with the first question, which I think really can lead into a presentation that was given to the Planning Commission last evening. Our question was, what is the multi-year plan to build more living units with density on campus and in the district to decrease the demand for housing by students on surrounding neighborhood streets that really does not allow young families, new professionals who want to stay in Burlington and live in Burlington, but are really, since students really lease their apartments for the most part in September, October, and November, when so the apartments are already leased for the following year, which really leaves graduate students and young professionals who would like to stay in Burlington and work in Burlington out of the picture as they're not able to find an apartment because they're already leased to incoming students from the university.
Well, I'll just say, you know, what Richard Kate, who's our Vice President for Finance and Administration, presented to the Planning Commission last night, he stated was really what we are considering a phased approach to adding new housing. So what you'll see tonight is what we're considering phase one. And the beginning of that planning process is going to the commission and coming here to the NPA and getting feedback from the neighborhood on how the zoning could be changed to achieve what we're all trying to do, which is to create more housing. The projects that I'll be showing tonight are what we're thinking of as phase one. I can talk a little bit as we go through that about some other sites that we've started to have some initial conversations about. We haven't gone as far in the planning, and until we know what the zoning will be on Trinity, we've gone about as far as we can before we go into further design and planning for additional sites. So, you know, the university is certainly thinking of this as a phased approach.
Keith, would you like for Lisa to share those slides now, or?
Yeah, I think this would
be
be,
okay time?
if you have nothing, if you don't want to add, please, I think this would be your opportunity to show those slides and talk about last night's presentation.
Great.
Okay. I'm going to show actually, it's a little bit of a combination. So we have started the process. Can everyone see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. let's see, just trying to get this, okay, into presentation mode. So we actually started this process with a presentation to the City Council about a month ago, and then to the Planning Commission last night. As I mentioned, this is the preliminary start of this planning process. There'll be more meetings, there'll be more public input, but I'll just run through just what we've started to present to the city. So some of these slides went to the council, some of them went to the Planning Commission. So just a quick overview. We're going to talk about, our commitment to housing our students, the current zoning restrictions on Trinity campus, and our proposal, and then we can get some initial feedback from the community. We track, obviously our housing capacity and our enrollment on campus. The housing capacity includes our residential life beds that are within the residential life system, as well as the affiliated beds that we have, like Redstone Lofts and Redstone Apartments. The yellow line shows our undergraduate enrollment over the last 11 years, and the green lines are the housing capacity. So this is just showing, we've been adding housing over the years to accommodate some growth in enrollment that we've had. We've tried to stay pretty steady with that. And this is the slide that Wendy was talking about earlier. Just shows a selection of institutions that we consider our peers, and then other public institutions across the country, and the housing requirements. As you can see, very few of them have a first and second year requirement like UVM, just a few others. Many institutions do have a first year requirement, but as you can see, there actually are a lot of institutions that also have no requirement. Which is why the university gets concerned about requiring more than 2 years, because if a student, and it's normal for students to want some independence. And so if they're looking at the University of New Hampshire versus the University of Vermont, they have to live on campus all 4 years at one and not at all in the other. That could be the swaying point for them to pick one over the other. So our goals for Trinity campus, we'd like to build new undergraduate residence halls there. And also, as Wendy said, we'd like to do some apartment style graduate student housing. While we are doing that, the current residence halls at Trinity are pretty old and in need of some upgrades. So we are planning to upgrade Mercy and Macaulay while we're doing this housing project. One of the things that Trinity campus is really lacking right now is a dining hall. There's some limited dining options, but for the most part, students have to walk to Central Campus to get a full dining hall experience, and also enhance the sense of community on campus. In our studies that we've done with students, graduate students are very interested in Trinity campus because it is close. And if they're in apartments, the dining hall piece isn't as big of a deal, but for undergraduates, Trinity, seems to be the campus where they feel like there's not a lot going on there. So we'd like to really enhance the sense of community there and make it a more desirable place to live. And then obviously we need to secure the zoning changes from the city in order to be able to accomplish these. So this just shows the zoning allowances and the request that we made to the Planning Commission last night. Currently, there's an institutional core campus overlay on Trinity, and I'll show you in a minute exactly where that is, where we have a 50% lot coverage allowance, and we are currently at almost 38%. There is a 115-foot setback from Colchester Ave, which really limits what we can do there. If you go east or west of our campus, the setback is only 15 feet. And there is a 55 height limit, which is in relation to the highest structure on Trinity campus, which is Mann Hall. So we're asking for an increase of up to 60% lot coverage within the ICC, a 25-foot setback, and then to limit the height within what is the existing 115-foot setback to 45 feet, and then beyond that, be able to go up to 80 feet. So this is Trinity Campus. This is Colchester Ave here. Oops. Sorry about that. East Ave coming in from here. The ICC, this is the Ira Allen School. This does not belong to UVM, but the ICC is essentially the central area of Trinity. It does not include what we lovingly call the ears, which is this piece over here, and then this piece over here. This part of our Allen School we do own. Those are not within the ICC, so we're not asking for the increased allowance there. It would just be in this area. And then just to show, this is the existing 115-foot setback. You can see it's quite far back from Colchester Ave. And this is just illustrating what the existing setback is for the buildings that are east and west of Trinity Campus. And so this is our preliminary thinking around what we could accommodate at Trinity Campus with some zoning changes. So this is Macaulay Hall here, Mercy Hall over here. This building in the front would be the graduate student apartments, and it would be about 120 beds in this complex here. You can see we've broken it up a little bit to accommodate or relate to the streetscape and not be quite so massive. Oh, sorry. And then the undergraduate halls would be along here, connected and around Mercy and Macaulay. And that would be about 400 beds of undergraduate student housing. We've talked a little bit, I talked a little bit earlier about the phasing. One thought that we have talked about is this is what we call the back 5 dorms, and a future phase might include taking down the back 5 and building there. They're another group of residence halls that really is in need of, really needs some upgrades or something completely different back there. And so this is just showing, a snapshot from north to south, just showing the massing of what these buildings could be. This is Colchester Ave here. This is existing residential style house. I think actually it might be a business across the street. And then this is showing the setback from Colchester Ave, the proposed graduate student housing that could go up to 45 feet. This house is 30 feet across the street. This is Macaulay Hall. And then this is one of the proposed buildings that could go on the parking lot next to Mercy Hall. And these are other proposed behind that. And this is just showing a photorealistic rendering of, again, not a fully designed building, but showing how you could really work with the scale and the massing and the architecture in the graduate student housing to really make it relate better to the neighborhood. I do want to note the 25-foot setback is from the city right of way, which goes 25, I believe it's about 15 feet from the street. So from Colchester Ave, it actually would be about 40 feet back. And this is showing, how the buildings could look behind that. And my camera is in the way for my cursor. And this is showing what an 80-foot building might look like behind Macaulay Hall. And then again, this is taking an existing picture of Colchester Ave, and again, showing the residential buildings across the street and how the graduate student housing, if built here, could relate to that. So that is what we have to share. Like I said, we had a preliminary conversation with the city council, and then last night, just preliminary conversation with the planning commission, who, as Megan mentioned, have decided that they'd like to take this up as a topic of conversation. It sounds like we'll be going back in March, possibly. We don't have a date for that yet. And we want to get preliminary feedback. I know we don't have a lot of time to talk about it tonight because we, had a lot of other things that we wanted to discuss. This is just preliminary for all of you. And I imagine that we will be back at some point to talk about it some more.
Did any of the other panel members want to make any other comments?
I'd like to say something. Just wanted to add that, we've been talking about housing and neighborhood quality of life and these kinds of issues for a long time with the city. The city's been a really good partner. I think the neighborhood project really brought a lot of these issues into focus. And I think this is, really a very positive culmination of those issues that we've been talking about and represents a really, it could be a really great step forward and, provide more housing at a time when it seems more than ever we need more housing for people. So I'm just glad that we're at this place right now and being able to talk about these things.
Agreed. Well said, Joe.
If not, I'm going to turn this back over to Hannah. We have about 14 minutes, I think, Hannah, for questions or comments from the participants. I saw a lot of hands up, so I'll let you take care of that.
Yeah, so if you want to ask a question, please indicate by raising your hand or just physically raising your hand. I see a couple hands up right now. I think we're going to start with Tom and then we'll go to other folks after.
Hi, Wendy, the project that's being proposed for the Trinity campus, is that to accommodate further growth at UVM? And if so, how much growth is really planned over the next 5 to 10 years?
It's not meant to accommodate growth. Right now, the university does not have any plans to grow our population. I think that we'd like to encourage more students to want to live on campus by building more appropriate new housing. We'd also like to encourage graduate students to live on campus who would like to. As Lisa stated, we have some housing that has reached its natural end that really needs to be upgraded in order for students to want to live there. You see a little bump in our enrollment this year. We're really attributing that to COVID. As you can imagine, for about a year, we had many of our people that were admitted take a gap year, take a year off. Some folks did not enjoy some of the online hybrid that we had going on and prefer to defer their admission until we came back to in-person learning. So we've seen a slight bump of about 500 students this year, but we do not expect any significant further growth in the future. So this is really to have some encouragement for more students to live on campus, different types of students. And we have some triples now that we'd really like to convert into doubles by having new housing.
Okay, next up, we will go to Jeffrey, then Karen, then Erhard.
Hi. First off, just looking at those photo montages, I just wanted to say I thought they looked really nice and seems like an appropriate use of the space if we're looking for places for new housing to go. At least at first blush looks great, but just maybe I missed it. I caught that the grad student housing was intended to have 120 beds. What was the total number of additional beds that were planned for that? And how much of a shortfall is that supposed to make up? Seems like 120 wasn't a big chunk of the student body.
120 is for the graduate apartment style housing, and then the new additional undergraduate housing would be an additional 400 beds for a total of 520. And once we're able to come to an agreement on some zoning changes for that parcel, as Lisa said, we're very interested in a later phase after we complete this initial phase in developing what we call the back 5, which is towards the back of that lot, into some more housing with additional beds back there as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, then next up is Erhard, followed by Karen.
Hi, folks. Thanks so much for the presentation. Sorry, I kind of missed the new time, so I missed your the first 15 minutes, and maybe you covered some of this. But a couple questions. One is simple one is, can you make these presentation materials available to us, or are they already available online? And how does, I guess, how does this fit in with your overall master plan for the university? And does this, in fact, what you're presenting tonight, represent your master plan for the Trinity campus? Another question I had was, it's always been, I know, a bit of a challenge to make campus life, campus living, something that really is attractive to students, because a lot of folks obviously want to live off campus and don't want to live under the UVM rules and regulations. So I'm wondering whether you're going to be doing anything different to make this housing more attractive and desirable to students who might otherwise want to live off campus. And then I guess it was really great to see the graphic about the number of housing units that you've had, and obviously applaud you guys for wanting to build more housing and helping to alleviate our chronic housing crisis in Burlington. What would be really helpful is to see maybe a graphic that shows the actual percentage of students housed vis-a-vis the overall census. So I know the overall number of students has changed and the overall number of housing units has grown, but I'm just wondering what's happened to the percentage, and whether that has actually, the percentage of students that you're housing on campus has increased as well over time. So I think those were my questions, and thanks.
Okay, let me try to get through them all. I'm going to start with the percentage question. So UVM has had a longstanding goal to house 60% of our undergraduate students. I would say over time, we've been right around that goal. This year, we're a little bit under, and I think as Wendy talked about, we had an additional 500 students that, little bump in enrollment that we weren't necessarily expecting and that we're attributing to COVID. We'll see what happens. We have stayed right around 60%, and consider changing that graphic maybe to show that. Let me go back to the beginning, presentation materials. This isn't on the website yet. I don't know if it's on the city website.
Yeah, we can make sure to share the links with the steering committee. There are presentations from both the city council and the planning commission that we can make sure.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. The campus master plan, I will mention, so our campus master plan was done in, the last iteration of it was done in 2006, and we actually are in the process of updating that. We haven't gone through quite the, 2006 was the beginning of a period of growth for the university. I'm sure you're all aware, we did a lot of building over the last 15 years. And so, our directive from senior administration was that we're not planning on being in that kind of a growth mindset, other than things like this, the new housing. We do want to do that, but we're really just going back to the 2006 and updating what needs to be updated. We're not looking at doing a lot of new building. We're looking at spending more time and resources on what we have. But as far as the housing goes, I mentioned at the beginning, what Richard talked about last night with the planning commission is that, we're looking at this as a phased approach, and we'd like to do more housing. We do have a preliminary look at Trinity campus in terms of where else some development could go. I don't know how familiar people are with our campus master plan right now, but our master plan The way that we've done it is it doesn't show necessarily a footprint of exactly where each building will go over the next 10 years, but we look at land banks, which are a little bit more nebulous areas where we could grow, and recommendations about what should be there. So I think that probably that Trinity land bank campus map is something we could show you all in the future. And the challenge to make it more attractive for students to live here. Yeah, I think the graduate student housing in particular is expected to be apartment style, probably more independence for them to encourage them to come to campus. I think, you know, going forward, I'm not sure in terms of, we haven't gone that far in the thinking on the back five and what we might do there in the future. You know, some of the other third-party partnership for juniors and seniors has also been apartment style. That's over on Redstone campus, but possibly something like that for undergraduates, upper class undergraduates at Trinity.
I'll also just add, Earhart, that Lisa had said before that adding a dining option on that campus and improving the quality of the housing there, we expect to encourage more students to live there. And so, you know, adding a place to eat and to engage with friends and other students might make that campus more lively. We're hoping that it will encourage students to want to live there.
Thanks to you both. I'll look forward to looking at the materials on something a little bit larger than my phone. So appreciate the presentation.
Thanks.
Okay, we have about 4 minutes left, and I'm mindful that we have a lot of hands still up, but Karen, you are up next.
Okay, I will be quick. I'm very excited that UVM will build more housing, but it will not do us any good if the enrollment grows. So is there any way that we can not give the zoning change if that just means we're going to add 500 more students to campus? Because the biggest problem is the people that, you know, want to stay in Burlington, and our neighborhoods change as we lose balance. I know that on Nash Place, I think 3 houses just turned into rentals the last year or so. And, you know, out of 15 homes, that's a lot. So that's the big problem, keeping balance in our neighborhoods. And there is no magic bullet unless we keep more housing. You know, we build housing on campus, and that was part of the neighborhood project. So I'm glad UVM is talking about this. You can't compare us to some of those other places because UVM or Burlington has very limited housing. We're stuck between the lake and South Burlington. So thank you.
Okay, next up, Bobby, you've had your hand up for a while. Bobby, do you have a question?
Yeah, Bobby Tani, this may be a little bit down the road, but what has any thought been given to what the students who already live in these residences, Macaulay Hall, et cetera, will do when the construction is going on?
Lisa, do you have an answer to that?
I don't have an answer to that right now. We can get back to you on that one.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, then we'll go Glenn, Allie, and probably end on Todd.
Am I unmuted? Yeah, hi. I just was curious about what the impact on vehicles is going to be. And I know there's certain rules for undergrads versus grads, and just how many additional vehicles do you think it's going to add to traffic on Colchester Avenue? And is parking going to be part of the construction? And coupled with that, is there any thought on additional public transit to kind of offset that? Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, Holly. You know, I probably should have brought up parking. I realized as I was finishing the conversation or the presentation earlier. I don't have a number yet. So just so everyone is aware, second year students are allowed to have cars on campus, first year students are not. The Mercy Hall, one of the wings will go on the parking lot at Mercy Hall if this iteration of a project moves forward. We look at parking on a campus-wide basis, and we have a joint institutional parking and management plan that goes through the Planning Commission and DRB every 5 years. Right now, because of COVID and the uncertainty last year, we have a 2-year approval. So we're going to have to go through the JIP process again, and we'll have to account for these projects in that when we go through the approval process. We do have a Trinity project that we were thinking about there, but it's changed a little bit. But we have extra capacity on campus right now. Due to the onslaught of telework, right? Like I was sitting right here in this dining room all day today and yesterday. My car was not on campus. And so our parking lots are less full than they were pre-pandemic. So we have extra capacity. The other thing is that the parking for these projects, it's very likely not all of it, if any of it, will be on Trinity campus. We have parking over at Centennial, which right now is leased to the hospital. One thought is that, we may take those spaces back and put some of the parking there. We also have a number of our physical plant vehicles parked there, so they might go somewhere else on campus. So don't have full answers for that yet.
Part of the reason I was asking is a lot of us on the call have been listening to presentations about the Colchester Avenue redesign and how that's going to be different with different width of sidewalks and lots of different elevations. And I didn't understand if this new project takes that into account and how that might, impact the metrics we've been looking at around that. So I just wanted to put it out there. I don't need an answer, but it's just a question.
Yeah, it's a good thought. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Next up is Allie, and we'll end on Todd.
Hi, yeah, Allie House. So I have, a lot of folks here have brought up the concern that many of our students want to live off campus. And I think that's in large part due to affordability. And so, you've mentioned like plans to have new dining halls, and it's nice to have those new amenities, but I guess I'm just curious how you're going to make this a place that students not only want to live, but actually can afford to do so. I guess I'm just hearing time and time again from students that they do have concerns around the pricing of on-campus housing, and it's out of reach for a lot of folks. So I guess, like what is your plan to address sort of the issue of affordable housing on campus?
So, I understand costs obviously is a concern, and it comes up a lot that seems to be a big driver of students moving off campus. As we've done various studies over the years and surveyed students, cost comes up. It's certainly one of the factors. Independence does seem to always rise to the top as the #1 factor. I think one of the things we probably could do a better job of as a university is communicating about what a student gets when they live on campus. So it's hard to compare the cost of living in the dorms with the cost of an apartment. And if you look at the cost on an annual basis, and acknowledging that students are only in the dorms for 9 months, whereas an apartment is a full year lease, the cost actually comes out pretty even. And then I think you also have to factor in what you're getting in the residence halls versus what you're getting in an apartment, which is staffing in the residence halls. You get all of your utilities, you know, we have police services on campus, Wi-Fi, all of those things that do cost, you know, there are costs associated with them. And I think probably we could do a better job of communicating that to students and helping them to make better, you know, be able to make good comparisons back and forth. You know, cost is obviously a big issue with the university, and, you know, the President Garamella has held tuition level for, is it the last 4 years, Wendy? Is it more than 4
Yeah,
years?
it's with the approval for this next year's, it's 4 years, and room and board is
Yeah.
included in that, as well as a reduction of fees. So, you know, we're acutely aware of the fact that cost is a real concern for all students. And so his affordability agenda with trying to hold both tuition and room and board to no increase is all a part of that plan. And while I realize that it's maybe not as quick as people would like it to be, there is a real commitment to that, and that's going to continue.
Okay, and then we'll end on Todd.
Todd Schlossberg, I live on Loomis Street, lived here since 1991. I'm heartened to hear Wendy Koenig's comments that the university doesn't intend to increase enrollment, doesn't have a plan for that. And so I have two questions. The first is, given that plan on the part of the university, would the university be prepared to make a condition of receiving the zoning changes it seeks, making a binding condition that it would not increase undergrad enrollment significantly, so as to, you know, stand by its commitment to try to meet the needs for existing housing pressures in our neighborhoods. And second, what provision is there to provide, given that it is upper class undergrads who are putting pressure on our residential housing stock and making it so expensive for families and lower income people to live in our neighborhoods? What is the university going to do as far as making a commitment to set aside these undergrad units, or primarily for upper class students, as opposed to, you know, just more housing for first and second year students?
So in terms of your first question, I think that that's a question that President Garamella will have to answer. I don't have an answer to that. I can't make that commitment on behalf of the university tonight. I don't know. In terms of the second question asking about housing for more upper class students, we do have some preliminary ideas about additional places on campus where we could build more housing that might be more attractive to, or perhaps dedicated to, more upper class students. It's part of the phased approach that Lisa was talking about earlier. We know that that graduate students are finding that space on Trinity campus to be more attractive as a place to live based on where it's located. I think upper class students would prefer to be more a part of Central Campus or closer to the downtown core. And so we have some preliminary ideas about additional places that we could build housing in the future, but we've got to get through this phase one first before we move on to that.
Could I just ask a real brief follow-up on that, Ms. King?
Sure.
Just given that you require students in first and second year to live on campus, and therefore the pressures on existing housing stocks are coming from third and fourth year students. If you're not committing some of these, a significant number, if not the majority of these 400 or 500 new beds on Trinity campus to meeting the needs of third and fourth year students, how will this project result in any improvement in our current condition? And how is this anything that we as neighbors should be getting behind?
So if I could just add to what I was saying, you know, this is going to be typical. The undergrad component is typical undergrad housing. We do have juniors and seniors who want to live in the residence halls. not a huge number of juniors and seniors. And, you know, with the uptick this past year in enrollment, we haven't had room for those ones who want to be in the residence halls to be there. So this does add additional capacity. It probably, this particular project probably won't be set aside for upper class. They would be sprinkled, you know, more throughout the residence halls all across campus. But this is additional housing above and beyond what we have now. So it does provide additional capacity for those juniors and seniors who want to stay on campus. I can't tell you that every single bed will be, you know, will be for juniors and seniors, but it does add that capacity for the ones that do want to be here.
Okay, great. Thank you all. I think I'll hand it over to Tom now to go into the candidate forum.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Keith, and for all of you for having us here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the conversation. Thanks.
Candidates, welcome to the Ward 1 NPA, or Ward 1 and Ward 8 NPA meeting tonight. I had sent an email out just for to let everyone know and ask the candidates to provide their priorities for the city. And I sort of seeded that by bringing up a few subjects, which I'm going to just mention in bullet form quite quickly. And that's the first one on my list was housing, which we've just been talking about, and also policing, equity, the city's budget, global warming, and importantly, how we as a city measure success in our city, you know, whether we're going where we want to go. So with that, we're going to start by giving each candidate 5 minutes to introduce themselves, describe their priorities, and I'm going to go basically off the list that I got from the city, which has wards, it's listed from Ward 1 to Ward 8. So I'll start with Ward 1, and the order will be Rob Gutman, Zariah Hightower. Those are the two candidates for the Ward 1 seat, and followed by Ali House and Hannah King for the seat in Ward 8. So Rob, you're up first. And then after that, we'll have questions from the audience. And if anyone's would not like to speak up, but would like me to ask a question for them, you can text me at 999-5572, and I'll bring your question up after each of the candidates has spoken. And also one other housekeeping thing, we'll go into the school commissioner race after we cover city council. So again, Rob, you're on.
Hey, Tom, thank you. And good evening to everybody who's on the call tonight. It's good to be here and good to be with you. I'm running for city council in Ward 1. And the reason is because I really love Burlington. I have a special affinity and have for a long time to the city. And I have a pool of knowledge and experience that I think would really apply to joining council specifically at this point in time. So I've been involved in housing inspection. I've owned small businesses. I volunteer for Habitat for Humanity, so I'm out there actually swinging a hammer, building houses in the New North End, and I think that all comes into play, especially when we're going to talk about housing. The other reason that I think it's important is to get involved and to join the city council is because there's a sense of dysfunction and being able to move things forward. And one thing I would propose right out of the gate, if I do join the council, is to have the whole council and the mayor out to the Habitat site to do a day of building together and team building and physically building. And I think that would be a great exercise for the council in helping to build bridges and pathways to compromise and cooperation, which I think we all can agree would be a good thing. So with respect to the major issues that I see, one we were just talking about, housing, and specifically in Ward 1 with the Trinity campus, I'm thrilled to see that the university is stepping up to help alleviate some of the housing pressure in Ward 1. But Ward 1 is kind of unique. in burdening the housing issues that we have in Burlington, and that we do have the university, we have the hospital center, medical center, and I think we shoulder a lot of the burden of the housing crisis in Ward 1. And what I would like to see is to share that through development, through building houses and additional places to live throughout the city, so we can relieve the pressure on our housing situation. We all agree vacancy is at a crazy low rate, and that creates a painful situation for renters and homeowners alike, and across all different housing sectors. And so I think the supply of housing needs to be increased. And one thing that I would suggest looking at in an effort to do that, and also to help in the looking at more affordable housing, is taking another look at inclusionary zoning policy in the city, and perhaps add to it, maybe as an experiment, density bonuses to developers if they are willing to provide additional affordable units. I think that might be something that could help spur more building of more market rate and affordable units. And don't forget that with inclusionary zoning, we cannot, market rate units go along with the affordable. So it's a good way to boost both of those. And I think there is a need and a need for a pathway for all of our renters, homeowners to either to join in the wealth building exercise of owning a home. Another issue that I hear in the ward is the problem with zoning enforcement. And I think that I've heard that from a lot of my neighbors that I speak with them. And zoning enforcement is a big deal. It's a big problem. And it's a big issue with keeping the character of our neighborhoods. And so one thing that I've thought that might make sense is to go to the administration and hold them accountable to answer some questions about zoning enforcement and why it is so lax, or appears to be, and maybe come up with a plan to require all participants, all players in a lease to sign an affidavit affirming that they understand the importance and the legal ramifications of enforcing zoning and keeping to the 4 unrelated adults and parking on driveways and all of the other issues that we're seeing with zoning and enforcement. Another big issue I see, and I think we'll all agree on, is public safety. And so with public safety, I think it's important to stabilize the police department. We can't let it diminish any further to a point where the state might have to step in to support us. I think losing local control of public safety would be a shame for us. And I think we're getting close to that margin where that might happen if we lose more officers. So I truly believe that it's time to build back and build out, complete with our visions for 21st century policing, with support for crisis management, for mental health, for social workers, and include that in rebuilding our police department. And I believe that the best way to do that at this point is to hire a acting Chief Murad as the permanent chief. And as a permanent chief, we can then hold him accountable, or much more accountable to upholding the standards and requirements that we need going forward, as well as giving him and the department a basis for building back in a way that's going to be equitable and fair, and in the vision of how we want our public safety systems to be accessible for us and to operate within the city. And then finally, I think there's another issue that we all talk about, and speaking with my neighbors especially, and that's the taxes and affordability. And so it's time to reevaluate the revaluation, if you will, understanding that communication around that process was probably suboptimal. And so I think that as citizens, we weren't really aware of some of the forces at play and necessarily why we had to do the revaluation when we did, or reappraisal when we did, and some of the forces at play in determining how the property values were balanced or out of balance due to the COVID situation, and using the income approach for valuing commercial properties versus the approach we use for valuing residential properties. So those I think are the 3 biggest issues. And I appreciate you listening to me and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Zariah, you're next.
Great.
Thanks, everyone. I think most of you know me. My name is Zorai Hightower. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm running for re-election. I'm also the executive director of the Peace and Justice Center, and I've lived in Ward 1 just shy of 6 years. 2 years ago, I campaigned on the issues of housing affordability and availability, transit and planning revitalization, police oversight, and equity for all. As you can imagine, I'm running again for basically the same issues, because although we are a very different place than we were 2 years ago, those are still the core issues I think that we're looking at. I moved to Burlington almost 6 years ago, and one of the conditions for me moving here was that after 2 years, I would be allowed to move to one of our other offices. So I wanted to either move to Seattle or DC or one of our offices abroad. And now I no longer work for that company, but I'm still here. And I think that says a lot about how much, well, Burlington has grown on me, but I think Burlington has also grown. And I think one of the big issues that we're still dealing with, and I had a hard time not bucketing these when we talk about priorities, because I think that they're all the issues are so intermingled, but I think equity, inclusion, and public safety to me is a big one. And I think, moving to Burlington, it's a small town and it's not a terribly diverse town. And I think that that's the perception that we have. And I think that's something that's changing more and more. When we look at our school district, a highly growing percentage of our school district is BIPOC children, which I think is fantastic to have that many diverse youth in our schools. And I think also, just as we walk around the city, I think we're seeing more diversity, not just in racial diversity, but all kinds of diversity, whether that's age diversity, LGBTQ diversity. And I think we're also seeing that in leadership roles in the city. Obviously on public safety, I think that it's a big chunk of our budget. I think that a society that spends more than 20% of its of its general budget on law enforcement, I think it says something about what we value and how we value it. And I think that matters to me. And I do want to see us spend, I don't think our police budget should be more than our planning, our fire, and our public works budget combined. I think that says a lot about what we prioritize. So I think I'm still, I think we've settled on, I think we've compromised on kind of the number of officers. And I think that I'm excited to see how we spend the rest of our budget and what that looks like in terms of equity and inclusion for low income folks, which are having a hard time living in Burlington. Section 8 voucher holders, can't even live in Burlington because there's no housing. And that brings me to my second priority, which is housing, which I have a hard time not intermingling with environment. But there's so many subtopics under housing that I think I'll spend a little bit of time on it, maybe even call it my top two. Or two of my topics. And one of the things, I think there's so much under this, one of them is houselessness. We've had a growing houseless population in Burlington for years, which, there's, at least Jason says to me that there's over 50 sites that he's seen that have houseless camps around the city of Burlington. And I'm really excited that for the first time this year, the city council moved forward on really directly addressing this houselessness, not just with the federal funding, but directly and, creating pods in the city for houseless folks. And I think that's something that we'll have to continue to do, is not use funding the way that we've traditionally used it with, kind of the bare minimum, but actually really head on tackling the problem. Another housing thing that I care about a lot is renters' rights. I think you'll know I care a lot about just cause eviction, which is in the House right now, and hopefully will pass in the next few days. I think not having just cause eviction is one of the biggest barriers that we have to address some of the low quality housing issues that we have, because folks are too afraid to complain. We have too little housing and there's too much turnover in the low quality housing that we have. And so either folks just move on to the next housing, or if they're complain, they're told to find new housing. So I think strengthening renters' rights is really the way to improve our housing quality, as is home ownership, hoping that if just cause passes, the next thing that we can do is have right of first refusal, so that folks won't be outbid by cash offers and other things like that. And I think there's a few other things the city could do creatively to improve home ownership. The last piece of housing is zoning. I also think we have to change our zoning. And I think we actually have to change it to be a little less favorable to single family housing, which just doesn't pay for itself, doesn't pay for the streets that are in front of it. We really need more multi-use unit properties, which doesn't necessarily mean more rental properties. I think having that be a mix of rental properties and home ownership homes, even if there are multi-use. And I think it's fine to make development easier, but I think along with that, we have to strengthen some of our policies, like our inclusionary zoning, which we reduced a lot 3 years ago. And I think balancing how much you're opening up to developers while also adding more requirements is usually the best balance. And then I would now say education is the third issue, but we don't have a lot of oversight over that. We've got others like Kathy, and I think the new superintendent is doing a great job. So I think my last one is going to be just how involved residents are in government. And I think a big part of that is focusing on some of the positive issues. And I think how much we are working together on things, especially on the council, which I think over the last year, the council has done a lot to really come together and work together on a lot of issues and worked on compromise. And I think celebrating more of that and not always letting, the media do the stories where we're working on where we disagree, which is on some issues. But I think especially with the council that we have, which I think you all know is majority progressive and Democrats, I think there's a lot of really exciting, really good work being done, engaging folks early on those exciting issues as much as some of the harder ones. And yeah, is going to be important for the city going forward. Yeah.
Thanks, Soraya. Next up is Ollie House.
Hi everyone. My name's Allie House. Yeah, like I said at the beginning, I use she/her pronouns. I'm running in Ward 8. And yeah, I moved to Burlington just a little over 5 years ago. And I bring experience from the front lines of the pandemic as a social worker and also working full-time in Vermont Public Schools. And yeah, I've been really inspired by these experiences to run. I see the impact that local policy has on folks' lives. And I fully believe that my experience working in this community will bring a unique lens to City Council. And yeah, I'm passionate not only about a multitude of local issues. I'm also passionate about the ways that these intersect. And I think oftentimes, we tend to talk about issues as though they're isolated, but really we know that many of these things are interconnected. And I'm a systems level thinker, and I have firsthand experience finding solutions to tangible problems within the context of these greater systemic issues at play. And yeah, I mean, I think now more than ever, we need experienced leaders who are optimistic about the future of our city, and who are also committed to tackling some of these issues head on. So I think a big one, of course, is housing. We live in a city that has 62% of the population renting, and we need real housing justice that names and resists the really, really inflated and horrifically high prices that folks are paying. And I think, something that I've heard echoed by students and long-term residents alike is the role that UVM has played in this. And as we know, they're a large corporation, and historically as a neighborhood, it's been difficult to hold them accountable, and a lot of folks have expressed concerns over this idea of maximizing profits versus doing what is actually in the best interest of our community. And I think this is actually the one issue that I hear students and long-term residents agree on almost 100% of the time. we just heard this presentation suggesting we put more graduate student housing on campus. It's if done right, it's a great idea to increase the number of housing, the amount of housing on campus, but also like we have this big empty pit downtown where many of our grad students are going to be doing their internships. Is there a way that we can turn that pit into something that might work for our community? And yeah, I think another issue that I know our community is really divided over is this issue of policing. Yeah, I think we really need to lean into a data-driven approach to this. And I think, many of you are probably aware that I'm the only candidate in this race who's come out and actively opposed the appointment of Chief Murad. And I just want you all to know that the issue that I take with it lies with this idea of someone holding a position of power and also saying that racial bias doesn't exist in policing. I think anyone who holds a position of power should constantly be examining the bias in themselves and also in the systems with which they exist. And I know I'm someone who reflects deeply before taking these kinds of stances. And I can tell you all right now with honesty and with transparency and certainty from the bottom of my heart that I'm not okay with us having leaders in our city. Our city deserves better than leaders who are okay remaining neutral and not doing that self-reflection. So that's kind of where I stand on that. I know this is an issue that's really, really divided our community, and we need leaders who are really going to critically consider bias within our police force and also bring people together. And I'm really looking forward to doing that if elected. And yeah, I also think we do need to be taking a look at, and hearing from more folks who are investing in our city in terms of home ownership. We need to be hearing more from homeowners, especially in Ward 8. It's largely a student ward, but we also can't be leaving people out of that discussion. So I really envision a Burlington where everybody can come to the table and have these kinds of conversations with honesty and transparency and feel heard and understood. Yeah, so thank you for having me on here.
Thanks, Allie. Next up is Hannah King.
Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Hannah King. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm very proud to be running for the Ward 8 City Council seat. It's a really surreal moment participating like this today, as I remember so vividly when I first started attending our NPA and ultimately joined the steering committee on November 13th, 2019. I'm very grateful for the opportunity that I've had to work with my fellow steering committee members. I'm running for city council to be a representative leader that listens and is responsive, is thoughtful in their approach to solving complex problems. I'm a renter, student, daughter of a single mother. My father was a construction worker and my mother's a healthcare worker and proud union member. Yesterday actually marked 13 years since my dad took his own life, so I've been reflecting very deeply on the ability policy has to not only push us forward, but in some cases even save lives. Those very lived experiences of my family have served as the foundation to my commitment of pushing actionable, progressive policy forward. I understand the daily struggles so many of my neighbors face because I live them each and every day myself. I believe that Ward 8 deserves a councilor who has proven themselves to be a dedicated public servant and that understands the intricacies of our local government, so they'll be able to produce results from the moment they're elected. And I'm confident I am that person. I believe we can solve our deepest challenges through working together and listening to each other. I've worked tirelessly on behalf of my Ward 8 neighborhood, serving on the NPA, as well as the Ward 8 representative on the Community Development Block Grant Advisory Board. I've stepped up to serve during times when literally no one else in Ward 8 would. I've been working to strengthen relationships between students and long-term Burlington residents. I've created a pen pal program I've worked with Community Coalition to de-escalate problematic situations in our student-dense neighborhoods. And with that, I also have lived experiences with the understanding that being a good city councilor and candidate goes beyond just serving on city boards. I'm proud of the time I've spent as a substitute teacher in my home school district, as well as the work that I've done organizing with immigrant and refugee farmers to fight for increased and fair land access. I'm also very proud of the support that I have of policy leaders from all over the state. State Treasurer Beth Pierce, Speaker Jill Korinsky, our own state representative Barbara Rachelson, and former state rep Mary Sullivan. My experience working with communities of all types ensures I will be a compassionate, well-versed, and prepared city councilor for Ward 8. When we're looking at the priorities for our city, the top 3 that I see are affordability, housing, and climate and racial justice. In terms of affordability, I've spoken very openly about my background. Coming from a single mother family, when I've put myself through school, I pay for all of my own education expenses and oftentimes support my siblings as well. These struggles have impacted the way I view affordability in our city. When they're not unique to just me. When I'm going door to door or calling or it's sharing letters with folks, most people share the same experiences that I do. It's far too expensive to live in Burlington. We need to work to create good paying jobs where we pay fair and livable wages. And with that, we also need to be creative about policy solutions moving forward. I've spoken openly about creating a guaranteed minimum income program because I'm confident that we can make Burlington a more affordable and fair place to live for all Burlingtonians. Housing's a human right. It's the foundation of health, racial justice, and long-term economic stability. As the Ward 8 City Councilor, I'll advocate for rent stabilization and the creation of more stable long-term housing options, especially for our neighbors experiencing houselessness. As a renter, I have experienced firsthand the realities of living in the Burlington rental market. We just saw an entire presentation about UVM's effects on the housing crisis. First thing that I did was emailed President Garamella to create avenues for dialogue, because the only way that we're going to move forward as a community is if we're opening up ways to have conversations. When we're saying we're going to hold UVM accountable, there's no way to do that, nor can we hold the city accountable on housing unless we're creating meaningful discussion. In terms of climate and racial justice, local municipalities, as well as individual people, have the responsibility of mitigating the effects of the climate crisis. I want to broaden access to public transit. We need to move away from strictly car-focused infrastructure and continue committing to expanding bike and pedestrian-friendly infrastructure. We need to enforce weatherization in rental properties so we can ensure that our renters are safe, protected, and warm during these winters. And lastly, we need to focus on preventing combined sewer overflows into Lake Champlain by investing in water filtration infrastructure and incorporating green design in our development. In terms of racial justice, I'm a white cisgender person. I recognize the immense privilege that I have when we're navigating these conversations. When we look at the current crisis of justice, we need to look at the systemic realities that we're living in. And that's why I've brought up that we need to create a guaranteed minimum income program, because it will begin to look at the systemic realities that we're facing. With that, I'm also incredibly proud of the work and opportunity that I had to work alongside Karen Durfee, the City of Burlington's first Black HR department head. Karen is doing incredible work in diversifying our city department hires, and as a counselor, and with that, I hope to work to ensure racial equity, inclusion, and belonging committee are provided adequate funding to do the critical work that they've already been doing. So I will end on that.
Thank you. We're going to open it up for questions. I did get one question texted to me, but if you can just raise your hand, I'll call on you, and please direct your question to one or all of the candidates.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hey, I'm Deborah Kraft. I live in Ward 1. I've lived in Ward 1 for about 5 years. And my question is about maintaining the diversity of age in Burlington. I think diversity of age is really important to a thriving city, but I'm wondering how we can ensure that the next generation has an opportunity to have a place in Burlington. So I know this has been brought up by everybody already tonight, but I think younger people are often driven out when they can't afford to buy homes or pay rent. And I know that the property tax reappraisal last year impacted a lot of homeowners and landlords and caused them to raise rent. But I think even before that, rent seemed to be climbing out of control. So I'm just curious, what are some possible solutions that people are thinking about? You know, is the answer rent control or changing property tax laws or building more UVM housing? I'm just curious what some people's ideas are.
Who would you like to answer that?
Oh, I guess, so since I live in Ward 1, I guess that would be directed to Zariah and Rob.
Okay. Zariah, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I think rent control is hard. I don't think it's a bad idea, but I think especially in a I guess having been on the council for the last 2 years, I think that there are things that are maybe less decisive that or divisive that we could do without some of the negative energy. I think that includes one, yes, more multi-unit housing. So reducing some of the single unit zoning. And I think that's especially applicable in Ward 1 and having there be more mixed housing. I think one of the things that goes along with that is strengthening our inclusionary zoning. So I think young folks tend to make less money, and the inclusionary zoning wages aren't, I mean, they're not terribly, I think they're what a lot of people in their 20s and 30s are making in Burlington. So I think strengthening that to have it be, have there be higher percentages or have it not be offsite so that it really is in mixed neighborhoods. I do also think that as someone who who successfully bought an apartment in Burlington, I think a lot of people are moving out of Burlington into other places in Chittenden County, which is, you know, bad for us in terms of losing those folks, but also bad for us in terms of some of our largest environmental impacts is transportation going back into Burlington. And so not having those folks stay here, not having housing for those folks means that we're both losing those folks in every sense of the way, but then also if they're commuting back into Burlington, that we have that increased climate change liability. And so I think that having more multi-unit housing and then having things that help first-time home buyers, including right of first refusal, so that there's so many people I know who love their home that they're renting, and then if it's sold, they can't possibly compete with some of the, especially some of the cash offers. And the first few apartments I put offers in on were almost, I was almost always outbid by, you know, wild cash offers. And so I think having ways for folks to buy housing and then also just converting more of the housing to not just rental housing, but also to ownership housing that is apartments would be a really helpful start.
Thanks. Rob?
So Deborah, thanks for your question. I think that the housing situation it's a very complicated, multidimensional problem that we have in Ward 1 and across the city. With respect to Ward 1, I think that the Trinity campus development, I'm very excited to hear that UVM is stepping up to help ease the pressure on Ward 1 housing. But I do believe that, I think this came up in the presentation or in the questions afterward, and I do believe that we need to hold them accountable to make guarantees that they're not going to raise their enrollment the same number of beds that they might increase, that we might allow them to build on Trinity campus. So the net, we have to use the Trinity campus development to ease the pressure on Ward 1 housing. Also really big, and I've been talking to a lot of neighbors during this campaign and previously, is maintaining the character of our Ward 1 neighborhoods. And I think that's really important, and we can't lose sight of that. And with respect to that, you know, there are proposals and thoughts and ideas of building in backyards and infill and things like that. And I think that would definitely change the nature of many of our neighborhoods, which have already changed to the point that it's becoming uncomfortable in some respects for the existing folks that are living there, both homeowners and long-term renters. I do agree that housing density is part of of solving this puzzle, of solving this problem, and I think that there are locations in the city that really lend themselves to higher density housing, and with higher density housing, we eliminate needs for transportation potentially, or individual transportation. We can batch a lot of that up if we've got more people living in one location that need to move. We also, it's also is a very economical way to lead to home ownership, especially for first-time homeowners. Buying a house on a property that requires maintenance and upkeep, as opposed to buying a condo where all of that is shared and managed professionally, I think is really important for providing first-time homeowners the ability to really start to build equity in their own home, foundation in the community, and a source of family wealth and generational wealth. And I think with respect to that, we also have to understand that there's been a racial component to this throughout our history. And I think that if we can provide home ownership opportunities across all previously discriminated against folks, I think that could be a very, very powerful way to help right some of the wrongs of the past. The last thing that I will mention is inclusionary zoning, and I think I mentioned it in my intro earlier, and that is we do use inclusionary zoning, but I think that if we can provide incentives for developers by maybe allowing for some increased density in some of those developments, and that will lead to more affordable units as well as market rate units. I think that would go a long way in helping to ease the housing pain and the housing situation and affordability situation that we currently find ourselves. We've been looking at this problem and trying to fight this problem for many, many years, and I think it's finally time that we get a handle on it and start moving forward with some real solutions.
Thanks. Julie, did you have a question?
It's been answered, but I'll just take this minute to just say how much I appreciate candidates being here tonight and the passion and supporting our community. So just a big thank you from me.
Thank you.
Next up is Caitlin.
Hi, thank you. This is actually Brian Sewell calling in. I want to give Councilor Hightower a chance to respond if she had her hand raised, and then I'll ask my question.
Sorry, and this wasn't a big note. I think it's just something I've tried to talk to folks about is character of the community, and especially because we had then the equity component with that, is I think character of the community or character of our neighborhood has been used a lot across the US to talk about. It's a kind of dog whistle term to talk about like not wanting diversity. So I think just using that consciously when we say that we, if we want more multi-unit housing, that does bring more diversity, and that doesn't necessarily destroy the character of our neighborhood. So that was a rebuttal.
Right. So can I just take one moment right there and just express that is in no way was a dog whistle intent or conscious comment on my part with respect to racial equity. In fact, I strongly believe that pathways to home ownership in our community are really important, and especially for BIPOC community members. And I, in my heart of hearts, I can tell you that I've seen the inequities in home ownership and wealth building in this country for since its inception, and I believe that really needs to be addressed.
You have a question now?
Yes, thank you. So this is Brian Sewell, Ward 1 on Loomis Street. For Councilor Hightower and candidate Gutman, I just wanted to ask if they could explain how their experience informs their approach to the city council.
Brian, you want to go first?
Did you say me first?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, and also wanted to, that wasn't anything against Mr. Gutman. I was just expressing something that I've heard in the neighborhood a lot and have tried to talk about with folks. Yeah, I think my experience, I think folks know right now I'm the executive director of the Peace and Justice Center. But before that, I was working in international development, especially on environmental issues. And so I think I bring a lot of experience on environmental issues across the globe, and also have lived for a very long time in the South, or at least Oklahoma considers it the South, most other people don't, and it lived in very Republican places. So I think to bring that together is I think I have experience working with folks that I don't necessarily agree with. I have experience looking at a cross-section of environmental things, and especially in international development, you know, looking at unintended consequences of policy and what that means over time, and having some forethought about doing things carefully. I think that my experience, especially in international development and working on a lot of private sector and public sector issues, is getting to consensus. I'm a facilitator by training, and so a lot of what I do is try to move groups to consensus on really complicated topics that require a lot of nuance. And then I think also just my experiences, my lived experience. I am, you know, clearly a Black woman who comes from a fairly economically disadvantaged background. And I think that has informed, I think that has created the ideology that I take into council with me every day and how I address issues. And then my personality, which is the one of compromiser, means that I take my ideology and then I'm really open to listening to other viewpoints and to try to find that compromise. And I think more than anything, I think most of you know, I have a very strong ideology and very strong beliefs. And because of who I am, I think usually I try to find compromise in that, because I believe in bringing people along so that we can really make progress, because otherwise sometimes there's backlash and that never works out either. So I think that's how my experience informs how I think that was the question.
Thank
how
you.
I engage on council.
So Brian, thanks for your question. With respect to council and serving on council, I can tell you that I have a lot of experience working with groups similar to the council in terms of trade organizations, sitting on boards of and treasurer of a trade organization, statewide trade group. I have experience as an affordable housing advocate. I have experience as a home inspector, a licensed home inspector. And now building homes in the new North End, because I really believe in the mission of affordable housing. So I swing a hammer. I encourage anybody on this call to come volunteer at Habitat. But mostly I believe that the city council is in need of some personalities that are really focused on collaborative and compromise type solutions to fixing our problems, and focused on the problems of the city of Burlington specifically. When we look at some of the situations we've seen in council with respect to debating issues about overseas situations and the amount of time and the amount of raucous behavior that's been allowed to occur at council meetings, I believe that it's it's just not beneficial to the city and getting the business of the city done in the way that I think it should be. And with talking with my neighbors in Ward 1, as I have been, there's a lot of agreement with that. And so I think I said earlier, I would, I see an opportunity with bringing all 12 counselors and the mayor out to work on the Habitat site on North Avenue in a way that will spend a day building together, building bridges together, interacting together in an effort to not only team build in the traditional sense, but also help move forward a solution to one of the problems that we've been talking about all night tonight, and that's affordable quality housing, and in a way that leads to home ownership and the wealth building that and generational wealth that brings with it.
All right, thanks, Rob. This is going to be our last question for tonight, and I think the candidates for Ward 1 have mostly answered this, so I'm going to address it only to the candidates for Ward 8, and that's what have you done, and this was something that was texted to me, what have you done to show you have the skills to help the council work cooperatively on contentious issues, and what would you do on the council to advance cooperation and community and get things done for Burlington? And I'll start with Hannah King.
Yes, thank you. I think that's a really important question. As I mentioned earlier on in my speech, I guess, I've been working for years in the Ward 8 community. I am very confident that I know my neighbors. Even before embarking on the campaign, I had conversations with them. I make calls, I send letters, I put in the work to make sure I know the community that I hope to represent, which I think is critically important. Beyond that, I also have experience working, with different communities, which I think is important, but also with different political parties. Throughout this entire race, I've tried to make it incredibly clear that I am running as an independent thinker. I really just am trying to be completely separate from the parties, which I think is important. And I think there's a lot of political damage that has been done, and from what I've heard on the doors, folks are very burnt out by that and are disinterested in the party politics of it all. So I think my experience working with different counselors in a non-political way gives me an advantage as well. And then beyond that, my time serving on city boards and understanding and learning and having the opportunity to see how city government truly works, I think is also very important. And I mentioned earlier that we really need leaders that are willing to have conversations with folks, even if it feels uncomfortable. In terms of the whole public safety discussion and whether or not to confirm Acting Chief Murad, I put out a statement as soon as it happened because I wanted to make sure that I was upfront with my neighbors about the fact that I have to do more work as an individual to figure out how I would vote. Ultimately, it's a 20+ month long process that I was not at the table for. And so I had 3 steps, and the 3 steps that I committed to were having a direct conversation with the acting chief as well as the UVM police chief. I met with Murad yesterday. I'm meeting with the UVM police chief tomorrow. I also am having one-on-one conversations with my neighbors, meeting them. This is a big concern and folks are not on the same page. And then I will be hosting a listening session at the end of the month. And so I think my experience putting in the work to see where everyone is at and meeting folks where they're at will make me a productive counselor who can work with all counselors, not just those in my own political party.
Thanks. And Allie, I think you get the last word in here.
Yeah, no, that definitely is a very important question. We do want to make sure that the leaders that we are electing are going to be effective in office. So I definitely hear that. Yeah, and so like I've said, I work in this community. I have very, very deep ties, both professionally and personally. And, especially as a social worker. Also, even though I have never held public office, I have worked closely with city councilors on various issues. I've been down at City Hall. I have testified on matters that are important to me and are important to the people that I serve. I've also met with Phil Scott, our governor, who many of you all know is a Republican, and talked about the water crisis of PFOAs leaking into our waterways and making people sick. That's something that my family has been personally impacted by. I think in this community, our community is not immune to this concept of performative activism, of people who come in and claim that they are activists and that they want to change things. And there certainly is nothing wrong with activism. But I think it's also important to remember that we have to go beyond just this surface level engagement in our community, and we actually have to be addressing things on all sides, on the activism side and on the political side, and really you cannot have one without the other. It's crucial to be involved in both. And yeah, as a city councilor, I really am excited to bring that lens to the table.
Thank you. Next on the agenda was an equivalent discussion about school commissioner candidates. Are there any candidates in the audience? Hearing none, Hannah, I'm turning it back over to you and we can go on with the agenda.
Awesome. Thank you. So next up, we are going into the school budget discussion. So Kathy, I believe you will be leading us through that.
Yes, I will. So this year, I'm pleased to say, and I'm sure most of you are pleased to hear, that you will have your school taxes reduced. Even though the budget has gone from 95.1 million to 98.2 million, annual increase in health insurance, wages, debt service, utilities, et cetera, are 2.5 million of that. And the 0.6 million of that is safety and security upgrades at downtown BHS. That will be paid for through surplus funds. So it will not actually be funds that will be taxpayers will have to be paying. So our property taxpayers will see a decrease of 6.89% this year, which for a homeowner of a $370,000 homestead it will go down, their tax bill will go down by $307. For those paying by income tax, they will have an 8.09% decrease, and their tax bill will go down by 102. That's for a $50,000 house. So most of this comes that there's $90 million worth of surplus in the state education fund this year.
Okay.
And that is what is helping us to have this decrease in school taxes this year. We have, through ESSER funds, added positions, very few, but those that we needed really to add. And I can also say that at Sustainability Academy and Edmonds Elementary, Champlain Elementary, there will be special educators added to. There will be interventionist tutoring at Sustainability Academy and Smith, and academic paras at IAA and Edmonds Elementary School. There will also be classroom libraries added to or books bought for them at IIA and Edmonds Elementary. There will be interventionist guidance added to at EMS and parent ambassadors at Hunt Middle School and student leadership at EMS. Mental health counselors, math and reading interventionist, restorative practice staff, and guided study teachers will be added at the high school. These are all with the federal ESSER funds, and due to the pandemic and what that has caused, mostly in mental health and kids falling behind academically. So those are being added, but those are all added and being paid for the next 2 years with ESSER funds from the federal government that were there for that reason. So literally, I mean, if people have questions, you can certainly ask me. I can try and answer as much as I can. There is a one-pager that will get sent out to everyone that will explain and give it to you in an easy format to understand. But if any of you have certain questions right now about the budget, please ask. I will try to answer them.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? I'm seeing Tom and Claire have their hands raised though, so we'll go to them first.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to check in. Thank you, Commissioner Allwell, for running through that. I just wanted you all to know that I'm here and can help take any questions as we go through the evening here. And just to reinforce Kathy's presentation, which is that we are anticipating a decrease, or we're projecting a decrease in taxes this year because of the surplus in the ed fund. And so that's good news for this year. But one of the things that our school board has been doing great work on is lobbying and advocating extremely hard at the State House for an equitable funding model. We currently have an extremely inequitable funding model that underfunds English learners by huge amounts. And so we're actually at a pivotal moment there. It's in the Senate Ed Committee, and they're really listening and looking like they're gonna make some decisions that could help us. But that's a big piece for us moving forward, because when we don't have a surplus in the ed fund, the amount that taxpayers or that we're paying per pupil is pretty high. And so fixing the funding formula will make that number reasonable. And it's actually, it's sort of a textbook example of systemic racism, the way that that we are funded compared to neighboring districts with higher with fewer students who qualify for English language learner supports, as well as fewer students living in poverty. So it's a big issue that we need to fix now for future budgets. So the budget this year looks good, even though it looks complicated on the ballot. The thing that we really need to work toward is future years.
And then Claire, I see you have your hand raised as well.
Hi, yes, I'm just Aquiles Lacoso, who is running for a school board candidate in Ward 1, is in the attendee. He needs to be promoted to a panelist to be able to speak. Please.
It keeps showing that they're declining to be promoted.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
All right.
you're here. You're live,
Hello,
Aquiles.
everyone.
Thank you.
Sorry for the... Awesome.
Great.
All right. Should I go or was I in the middle of something?
Yes, it's your turn to introduce yourself, Aquiles. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, Claire. Hello, everyone. My name is Aquiles Lacosu. I am currently undergrad senior at SUNY Plattsburgh, right across the lake. I'm also a previous BHS graduate. I graduated in 2018, and I am definitely one of the younger individuals who is looking to get involved and started with the school board. I am a psychology major right now, and currently trying to apply to UVM for graduate school. So I'll be back home close to the spring, and obviously during the fall. So I wanted to get interested. It's a nice opportunity for me to look at the school side of things behind the scenes and see budgeting, see what kind of work you guys are doing. And since I am a younger individual who is pretty connected in the community, I wanted to get connected through the school board and just touch up on issues that I've seen as a young individual, as a young Black male, and also just speak on issues that I see present in the community. I also have some good ideas, so I'm looking forward to share my voice and getting along with and meeting everyone else. And that's pretty much it for now. Thank you.
Does anyone have any final questions before we move on? Seeing none, we will go into the final part on the agenda, which is the state redistricting update from Zariah and I guess just Zariah. So you can take it away.
Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, I won't talk too much on this. I just wanted folks to know that the city council for the first time looked at the maps that the House is proposing for redistricting on on Monday at the city council meeting. And we have a deadline of next Tuesday to give them a final answer. So I just wanted folks to kind of know that because they sent us a mixed district with some districts that were 2 seats and some smaller districts that were just 1 seat representing them. And the council gave the broadly consensus feedback that we either want all districts that are 2 or all districts that are 1. I heard today a rumor that now they're going to give us 11 seats instead of 10, which obviously will make that impossible for the 2, that it's all the same across the city. So unless I hear otherwise, from folks, and I'll send out a front porch forum post about this, but I'm planning on advocating for a 11 1-member districts, because we heard from the survey that folks want smaller districts, and especially we don't know yet how the Senate is going to break up their things, but we assume that it'll be larger chunks. And so planning on advocating for 11 1-member House districts. And I think that's it. And then the other thing is clearly, I mean, this is for Ward 1, but Ward 1 was split up kind of along Colchester Ave in some of the maps, just so folks know that. And Ward 8 is completely different. There's a downtown district and whatever else not.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? Okay, seeing none, I think that.
Actually, Hannah, I do have just one last thing, and that's
Okay.
if anyone on the call has ideas for subjects for future NPA meetings, it would be greatly appreciated if you would send a quick note and say, hey, I want to hear about this or about that. that would really help the steering committee schedule subjects for discussion. That's it.
Okay, great. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. We will see you next month.